Hi everybody, I thought I would hop on here today to do one of the autumny pages from my new book Woodland Watercolor to celebrate my 7-day challenge that I'm doing with Omar Wynne on Instagram starting next Monday the 28th of August and running for a week. So to warm up I thought I'd probably spend about 20 to 30 minutes just painting this page with my new set of watercolours that I've made using Winsor & Newton paints, watercolour paints, and my Winsor & Newton brushes. So to start with, I'll tell you a bit about my materials. I'm using this tin, and these are the ones I've squeezed in. I have a tutorial on my YouTube page if you'd like to see that. And these are the brushes I'm going to be using. So it's both round brushes, one a size 3 and one a size 0. So for fine details. I've got my pot of water and I've got my book, which is on watercolour paper. So to start with, my book goes through the seasons really. So it starts with spring, we've got summer images, summer obviously filled in, autumn, you can see there's a lovely autumny one with pheasants and a sunset, through to more wintry scenes, so deer and turtle doves and things. Oh, and a lovely snowy scene at the end. So, but I'm going to crack on. So it's a beautiful autumn day outside, well late summer day, and so it's extremely bright but it's quite shaded in my studio, so I'll try and brighten it up and hopefully it's not too shady for you. But I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to just spend about 20 to 30 minutes doing this one and just see where it takes me. Just go with the flow really and not worry too much about mistakes or anything. So I'll describe the colours I'm using as I go along to help. So I'm going to start with some of the lighter tones, I think, some of the warm yellow tones to really get me going. And this is a cadmium yellow pale. It's quite a bright yellow, but I think it'd be really nice to have a few brighter pops of those autumny yellows on the apples, and then we can, then I can knock them back a little bit later. A little bit maybe on the leaves. So I'm not being too precious about this. I am literally just sploshing it on. A little bit of yellow in the centres over here. And maybe the centres of the blackberries. And this one here. And then I'm going to leave that to dry as I carry on around the piece. So just, you know, doing whatever the mood takes me. I'm going to use a little bit of this burnt sienna colour over here. Burnt sienna is one of my favourite colours because it just makes everything look beautiful and autumny. So I'm going to be painting these little conkers in. I'll build up the layers I think on these. So I'm going to use this as like an underpainting, so it won't stay as little brown blobs, as well as on these little acorns over here, these acorn cups. I think I'm going to be adding a little bit of green in there in a minute. But I want those to be a little bit rusty. And as you can see, I'm just going over the lines. What I haven't got is some tissue for blotting. So I've got this to hand. So any blotting that needs to be done, I can just blot away. And this is quite heavy 200 GSM watercolour paper, so it takes quite a lot of sploshing around and won't warp too much. Right, so I'm going to go for the mushrooms. So again, I'm just using a really light wash of burnt umber with my size 3 brush. I might attack it with some pencils at the end, we shall see. Quite like a bit of orange in there, so I'm going to add a little bit of cadmium orange just on top of that to make that one pop a little bit. So we've got lots of those lovely autumny colours coming through. And again, I want to evenly move the colour around the piece, so I've got, you know, not just one brown section, one yellow bit. I'd like it to have a bit of fluidity, so I'm going to use the brown across the piece, the burnt sienna colour, bit on these mushrooms. Let's see, I'd quite like this little mouse. You can just have a nice brownie blob on him. He's quite a friendly little mouse. And then let's see, what else do we want? It's a little bit browning. Quite like this little fallen oak leaf to be a bit brown. And maybe some of the mushroom bottoms to be a little bit browner as well. And the gills. So I'm not worrying at all about staying inside the lines. I am just going for it. I don't care really whether or not it's perfect and neat. It's all about having fun and just relaxing into the painting. So here we go. Right, so I've got a bit of brown on here, and I'm thinking I'd quite like to paint in that basket. Now I did mix myself. I've got a YouTube tutorial coming up about this. A lovely brown colour. This is a mixed light brown. I think this was a mixture of white, burnt umber. But this is my fail-safe trusty brown. I've got a video on how to do this, so you can learn to mix your own colours. But that is a nice sort of muted brown, and that sits really nicely with that basket colour. I haven't decided. I'm going to go with that brown for some, maybe a slightly richer burnt umber for these pine cones. It's already starting to feel more autumny with the brown tones, I think. Let's just paint that in. Let's make one of these little mushrooms on here brown too. Maybe we'll have one red one and some brown ones. And it might be nice to have a little bit of burnt sienna as well on this leaf here. And a little bit of brown on these leaves. Because they're never perfect. These are little blackberry leaves. And actually blackberry is one of the prompts. So you can see what I'm doing here. Right, so I think I might crack on with a little bit of green. I'm going to, I did mix myself a green. This is I called it my mixed sage. And I'm going to use some sap green with that, and sap green and maybe some olive green. Actually that was the sap green and this is the olive green. Right, and just go for it. So I'm going light at first with all of the colours, and I can build them up. Oh, I've painted the blackberry green, which is not ideal. Doesn't matter, I can just blot it off. And this is probably looking quite browny to you at the moment, but I will try and bring in some like more vibrant colours. Look, so I've got some sap green there, which I'm going to use on these little leaves here. But I want a really loose autumny kind of vibe with this, so let's go with my olive or sienna. That's my sap. Yeah. I think that might be really nice for this fern, this curly little fern. And I can still paint with the tip of my brush. If you hold it up at a slightly higher angle to get all the details. I don't have to swap to my tiny brush yet. I can get plenty of detail with this large brush. I'm going to use that as little as possible, just go bigger. Like so. And again, this mixed green on here and here. I might try some slightly different greens on here, so I'm going to use, this is my dark mixed green. I think it was a mixture of hooker's green maybe and some white and a little bit of burnt umber to add some detail to these blackberry leaves. Now that's a little bit dark, I think, so I'm going to painting those curling leaves with a bit of detail. So I'm starting to layer up a little bit in different areas, but not too much. This dark green will be perfect for these kind of evergreen pine cones. I've got a relatively steady hand, but you could always swap to a finer brush at this point if you wanted to get, you know, real precision, but I don't think it hurts to have, you know, lots of things outside the lines because you're just having fun and like I said before, relaxing into the drawing. Okay, so one of my favourite colours is Terra Verde. It's this colour. And it's sort of a really good sage colour. I imagine this little bouquet over here to be dried herbs and things, so I don't know, dried mint or basil or whatever, so I'm going to use that. And the more intense and the less water you add, the darker the colour will be. So here I've added hardly any water, it's quite dry, and the colour, as you can see, is more pigmented. It's quite an opaque colour actually, so it doesn't really mask the line work too much. Right, so again you can see I'm sort of spreading the colour evenly around the piece. A bit more of that Terra Verde on here. Blot that, and if you make a mistake or you don't like it, you can just add a bit of water and then blot it, and it sort of lifts the colour away, which is always really handy. You think actually that's not a really good balance, like again I went outside the lines but maybe a tiny bit too much. I'd like to add to make these a bit warmer. That green dark green I added was too cool. And I'm going to use some of my mixed brown again to paint in these little stems. There we are, and again on this blackberry stem. And I'm going to use, what shall I use for this one? I think maybe something a bit brighter, maybe like a Hooker's Green Dark, which is this colour. You can see it's got a lighter green to it, so I'm going to use that pure, just watered down onto here, and we can always knock it back with a wash of brown or a wash of green or blue afterwards, or even some Payne's Grey if it's too light. I think better to go lighter and then knock things back with a darker layer on top than start too dark and have to try and lift all the paint off with tissue. So there you go, and while I'm next to this page I'm going to add some green to this little oak leaf. It was supposed to be brown, but I think that green does look quite nice on top. I think I'll add a bit more vibrancy on there in a minute. Right, so back to a bit more burnt sienna, and I'm just mixing that in with all the greens here, so it's a little bit of a hodgepodge of colours. And making these little cups to the oaks, to the acorn, sorry. A bit more mossy coloured. I haven't decided what I'm going to make my blankets or my book yet, but my wellies I think I will make green. I've just mixed a slight creamy colour, a bit of cream just to the edge of the book, and I might even do a little bit of a cream wash on this blanket, and then that can be the undercolour. You can barely see this, it's just white, Chinese white I think, with a touch of my mixed yellow. Right, I'm going to crack on with my wellies because I've already spent, how long have I spent doing this so far? I spent 13 minutes and I don't want to spend too much longer. I want to spend another 10 minutes or so doing this. So I've mixed a bit of this olive green and I'm going to just quickly paint in these wellies. Go. Slightly darker heel. I'm going to use a touch of this brown for the heel, or maybe a bit of green for the bottom there. No, I haven't at all used my smaller brush yet, but never mind. I would like these apples to have a bit of red in them, so I'm going to be using a cadmium red. I'll put it up in this corner. Well, that's not a cadmium red, that's a cadmium red, which is warmer. You can always make colours warmer and a bit more vibrant by adding yellow, so I'm going to add a bit of yellow to that. So now it's a lovely peach colour. Add that to the top of this apple. All of our apples are ripening at the moment, but they're not quite there yet. I tried to eat one yesterday and it was a little bit sour, so to be a bit more patient and hang on until they're ready to pick. There we are. Right, these conkers need a little bit more definition, I think. So this outer bit will be darker. And I think I would like the book to maybe echo some of that red, but maybe a slightly cooler red, so a little bit of a pinky red. So I've added a bit of alizarin crimson, and I'm going to paint that book really, really lightly with that. Oh, I've gone onto the binding there, and I don't want to do that, so I'm going to block that off. Red is always a notoriously hard colour to lift, actually. Once it's on, it's more permanent than others. So you can still see a little bit of that, so be quite careful in adding red. There we go, and I think I might go for a purplish. I've made a mixed shadow purple, I call it. I'm going to do a mixed purpley kind of blanket here. Well, that is still a little bit wet from the Chinese white I added earlier, so that's why I'm blotting it. Right, and we need a little bit more of the brown on the basket. Here. And I think a little bit of the yellow and the burnt umber on the tops of the mushrooms. I don't want them to look too boring. And yellow. There we are. I'm going to do a bit of oh, there's some brown missing from around here too. Put the shadow around there, and then adding a tiny bit of detail onto the handle over the top, and a tiny bit of detail onto the mushrooms too. I'm going to use a dark brown, bit of dark brown and Payne's grey mixed together to make some shadow behind these mushrooms, so the bottom of the basket looks a bit darker, and so they pop out a little bit more at you. You can see here I'm adding in some dark areas, and already there's a little bit more depth to that. I'm going to add a little bit of shadow underneath this blanket as well, so it's placed on the ground and not just floating. There we are, and then I knock that back a tiny bit. Same with these wellies, I'd like them to be sitting there, not just floating. So again, I'm going to use a little bit of touch of that brown there, and the same as this. I'd like this cup to be grounded a tiny bit more. I'm going to use a tiny bit of purple here to put some shadow onto my cup, so he doesn't look entirely flat. Just to one side, and maybe with a little bit of my mixed purple and some Payne's grey to the inside of the cup as well, the inside rim. So he has a bit more three-dimensionality to him. Right, I'm going to use a warm red here, I think, for this. It's mixing into the green and going a bit brown, but never mind. Into this blanket. So this blanket has a lovely checked pattern on it. I'm making it up as I go along. I have got a mountain of check blankets next door to me that we get out for picnics and things. They're often multicoloured woven wool, so they have purple and red and green and all sorts, so maybe I'll do that with mine as well. Let's put a little bit more shading on these wellies. So I've got a mixture of that olive green and a tiny dash of burnt umber to add some three-dimensionality to the wellies here. I don't want them to look completely flat. There we are, a little bit onto the little label. We all know what brand these are, don't we? Although mine aren't actually that brand. I like a Dunlop welly, if I'm honest. They're nice and sturdy from the farm. I'm painting some traditionally trendy kind of wellies. Right, so I'm going to go for a bit more green on this blanket. Following along the lines of the pattern, so it kind of looks a little bit stripy, and then going the other way so you have that kind of crisscross effect. Excuse me, have a little drink. Right, there we go. Right, some more grass over here. It's definitely looking very autumny, isn't it? A little bit murky if I'm honest, but we can use a little bit of brighter pops of colour to zhuzh it up a bit in a minute. Right, so I've added a bit of red to one of these apples. This red here, this apple's going to be a bit more red. And I'm going to make this little apple, this little mushroom one's cut red. So I'm going to try and bring the red through the piece, so a warm red, so it doesn't look sort of unbalanced. I'm going to add red to this mushroom here, I think, because I do need some red down this end, as well as a bit more red to my blanket. I'm going to add a touch of my mixed pink to the edges of the leaves of my blackberries. They've got a little pink flowering leaf there. Now I'm starting to go over all of the different layers. I'm adding some burnt sienna again to make this this conker a bit darker. I'm doing a few little spots on the leaves. That might be fun. And some detailing, some shadowing on them, so it makes it look a bit more orangey on these mushrooms. Now using the real tip of my brush here to get some of that detailing in. Right, I'm going to use some purple, I think, again, to bring out the lines in these blankets, and then maybe some green. Purple and green always make a lovely combo, especially when they're lovely and muted like this. So here again is my olive green, using the side of my brush really carefully. So you can see a bit of fine detail on my picnic blanket. Right, how long have I been? I'm on 23 minutes. Okay, so I'll let myself have half an hour, I think, then. And then I will stop for sure. I'm going to add a bit more brown onto my acorns, but I think that's a little bit too red, so I'm going to add a bit of burnt umber to that. Maybe a touch of Payne's grey. Oh, that's getting kind of nice and nutty now. Add that to my acorn over here. And a little bit to my mushrooms too. See, when I'm trying to be quick, I get distracted by chatting away and adding details. Right, my little mice are looking very neglected, so I'm going to crack on with these. I'm actually going to use the fine brush, I think, for these. So I've got the main shape of these little mice down, and then these are kind of little field mice, and then I'll add some quick details. They're not meant to have long pink tails or anything, they're meant to be kind of friendly and sweet, so we'll make them little brown bodies. Right, and oh, we must not forget our blackberries as well, so I'm going to do a wash of the blackberry, and then I'm going to go over that in a second. So this is literally taking 2 seconds. Right, there we are, got a lovely blackberryish purple wash on there. And a tiny bit of detail on here. Tiny bit of burnt sienna on here. I think I'm going to need, for these tiny little details, I'm going to switch over to my fine brush. I'm probably smudging everything as well, so that's not ideal. Maybe I should stop talking, that's the key, and then I'd work a bit faster instead of rabbiting on. Right, so I'm getting too distracted with all these lovely leaves and things. Like, I like that little pop of yellow there. I could do a bit more yellow down here, a bit more yellow on these leaves, and green. It's nice to have a bit of contrasting green, so use as many different greens as you can in yours. You can see the terra next to the sap green is lovely. Look, this little apple, this little blobby apple, is now half green, half green and half red. Right, so you can see now that this green I'm painting here is quite pure, it's quite dark, so I'm going to just lift a little bit of that colour with my kitchen roll. And then finally some lovely little details on my friendly mice. I'll start up here. I'm just using tiny little strokes. I don't know if you can see this, but it's really fun to do because they're just tiny, tiny little marks. And all the hard work is done for you with the painting already, with the drawing already, so it's just little details you're trying to fill in with these little details here at the end. Right, a bit more brown. Let's make one of these a little bit curly and brown. I'm going to make this book under here a bit of a contrasting colour. I'm going to mix a bit of a teal colour, I think, she says optimistically. So I'm using a cerulean blue with a tiny bit of viridian hue. That's a bit too green. Let's add a bit of Payne's grey to that one. It's kind of tealy, needs a bit more blue. Let's go with Prussian blue in there. There we are, that's kind of a nice dark teal. And that's what I'm going to paint this book. I don't know why, but I thought it might be quite nice to have a contrast. Use a bit more red to intensify that red of this top book as well. You have to do it across the whole thing, just lightly. Trying to make it bleed into the other colours. I'm going to add a few little details to this little mouse here. So following the direction of the fur. It's so enjoyable doing tiny details like this. I'm sure I've gone longer than half an hour now, haven't I? Quite a few more liney details on the mushroom bottoms. Maybe a darker brown, bit of burnt umber. Right, let me check how we're doing for time. 30 minutes. Right, so we're nearly there. We are nearly there, and this is looking super autumny and lovely, so how about I add a quick sneaky bit of pencil on top? What do you think? Let's put this back on here. Use a slightly larger brush to speed things up a bit. Right, there we go. I think we're pretty much done with my autumny page. I'm going to leave this to dry for a little while, and then I'm going to attack it for 5 minutes, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, just adding a little bit of detail on with my pencil. So it's been a few minutes and I've tried not to fiddle with it. I've only fiddled with it a tiny bit in the meantime. But I've got a selection of greens and browns. You can't really see the different brands: Woodland Watercolor, Caran d'Ache, Winsor & Newton. Yeah, just a mixed bag really. I think there's some WH Smith pencils in here actually, which are surprisingly good. They've got really nice colours. Anyway, I'm going to plonk these down and I'm just going to go for it with adding details. So I might change the angle of this so you can see a little bit more up close what I'm doing. There we go. I'm going to use this red colour. It's like a pinky red. And anyone who knows the way I work knows I don't stay inside that lines too much. I'm not too worried about staying, making things too neat. So I want to get a bit more intensity in that red there. I'm not going to do too much drawing, I don't think, but you can just pick up on that red there. I like to use a little bit of this, what's this called, terracotta, to pull out the brown in this apple behind, and I'm going to go around the terracotta to darken those a little bit, add a bit of definition around there. Draw in some of my mushrooms, maybe do a few lines on my mushroom gills. I kind of forgot to do that when I was painting. Yeah, a few spots and maybe a bit of green. So what's this? This is called olive green. And so I'm going to work the green like I did with the different colours. Work the green around the piece. So I'm using it here, and I'm using it here. I'm using it on here. I'm probably bringing it a little bit up to this this little bouquet of herbs up here. I forgot to paint in the brown string of this, so I can use my pencil to do that. So really nice. And then I didn't do that one, so I add another little line on there. And then, to be honest with you, I don't think I gave these at all mice enough attention. So I'm going to do a quick little bit of painting in on there, around his tummy and his ears and his little tail. There we are, and on these acorns as well. And what I haven't done is put much yellow in. I would like a bit more yellow in. So this is a yellow ochre. So it's kind of somewhere between a yellow and a brown. But that might be nice to pull into my blanket actually. This blanket was looking a little bit boring. Yeah, that's much nicer. Now I've got green, red and purple and yellow ochre in my blanket. I would like a blanket like that, please, somebody. Husband. There we go. Let's see. A bit more definition on these booties. And I'm not worrying too much about staying inside the lines. It's just about adding a bit of movement to the piece, you know, because it's really easy to get really particular with things. Right, that green isn't good enough. Olive green, is that the same olive green, different olive green? Let's see if this is a bit brighter. No, that's still a murky olive green. I need a lighter green. Cedar green, let's see what cedar green looks like. No, also murky. Shall we go bright? Ooh, this is like a pear, an Arteza pencil. That might be fun to pick up some of the colours on my blanket actually. I don't like that line there. Let's do that again. That's nice, and we've got a little pop of this brighter green. Bit on the boot. Bit on the leaves. On the daisies, there's little tiny daisies, that might be fun. Again, I'm balancing it out, so I'm going all the way around the piece, not just sticking in one spot. These oak leaves over here could do with a bit of a zhuzh up. Right, let's find a nice yellow colour, or the actual yellow. What is this called? This is W.H. Smith pencil, and it doesn't have a colour name on, but it looks like a cadmium yellow, so I'm going to add a bit up here. And then a little bit to the centres. Let's make these mushrooms on here all red, maybe. I think they need to be red, don't they? Look, because that's kind of cute. And maybe this one can be red too. We might make one little red one in this basket. Although I wouldn't recommend eating red mushrooms if I was you. There we go. I think we're done. Giving up now. I have issues with stopping or knowing when to stop. I just keep going. Oh, I forgot about the blackberries. Right, I need to find a purpley kind of colour. This will do. That's nice. There we are. Bit of purple. Actually, I don't really like that purple, but never mind. If you've lasted this long in this video, then you're not going to care what kind of purple I put on there, are you really? But thank you for staying with me if you've watched the whole thing. You're amazing. You guys are such a big support to me, so thank you for watching along. Right, I think we're pretty much there. Let's see. Here we go from blank page to painted page. Oak leaves, apples, wellies, cute little basket of mushrooms, blackberries and little mice. Really hope you've enjoyed watching along. Thanks for being here and see you again next time. Bye.